If thinking correlates with the imagination and the imagination is God and God is a creator and you're not thinking, that means you're not creating the life you want. In order for a person's behavior to change, the person has to be addressed. The thinking has to be addressed. It's not until you change your focus that the results in your life will begin to change. Hello there and welcome. Welcome to Manifesting. I'm Josiah Samuel Harry. I'm the author of Choose Love, Not Hate, and I Say Yes. 366 powerful affirmations adapted from Neville Goddard's Law of Assumption. This episode is a follow-up from the last episode, which discussed how to live in the state of success and prosperity. In the last episode, I talked about Earl Nightingale and his famous broadcast titled The Strangest Secret. The thesis of Earl's body of work, The Strangest Secret, is we become what we think. We become what we think. In this episode, we're going to go in depth into thinking, and we're going to look at thinking from a first principles point of view. So, what is thinking? What is this wonderful thing that we all have the ability to do? Thinking is intentional, directed mental energy focused on a specific idea. So let's unpack this in more details by looking at nature. In nature, everything produces after its kind. Trees produce after their kind. Animals produce after their kind. Like nature, thoughts, the thoughts you think produce after its kind. Your thoughts are always, without exception, your thoughts are always expressed as your results. Today's day 2. The experiences you're having on day 2 are directly correlated to the thinking that took place on day 1. There is no exception to this law. This law is immutable. Your thinking produces your results. Period. You've heard what I've just said, but now I want you to really consider what I'm saying. What has your focus has your life. Whatever has your attention has your life. Whatever you're thinking about, whatever dominates your line of thoughts throughout the day is what's going to control your life. So I have friends who are medical doctors, and let's talk about this one medical doctor, and we'll name him Scott. So Scott is a successful medical doctor. He's married and he has one child. Scott's life, however, is filled with all manner of small drama. Most of the drama that Scott experiences are things that you would say lots of couples and lots of people actually deal with. But Scott's experiences are different because of one reason. Every time I talk to Scott, Scott is either heading to a therapy session or coming out of a therapy session. And I brought that to Scott's attention. I said, Scott, every time we talk, you're either heading to some therapy session or you're coming out of a session. What's that about? And he said, I want to get a handle on my life. When I feel like my relationship is not going the way it ought to, my wife and I will go to counseling, and this is something we've been doing for years. I live a fast-paced professional life, and sometimes I feel like I don't have a handle on what I'm doing. And when I feel like I don't have a handle on this fast-paced life that I live, I go to my therapist, and my therapist gives me these pointers that bring me back to equilibrium. I say, is that really what happens? He said, it sounds like you have a different conclusion. I said, I just want to know that what you're doing is actually working for you and you're living your best life because you deserve to live your best life. He's like, no, what do you actually think about, what I'm doing? He said, don't you think if I'm in a relationship and things are not going well, it makes sense to seek counseling? I said, yeah, that works for lots of people. And I think counseling has its place. I think therapy has its place. He said, Joe, speak plainly, because that's what he calls me. I said, Scott, I don't think the issue is really in your relationship or that you're working in a fast-paced environment. I think you're your issue. He said, what do you mean? He said, no, that's what I'm trying to tell you. I'm trying to get ahead of everything so I don't become an issue. I say, Scott, I think you have already become an issue. Your therapist is just a way to mask what you're dealing with. In fact, I think your therapist is not actually helping you at all. I don't think that relationship counselor is actually helping you and your wife. And this is not to say that therapy does not work, or I do not believe in therapy, or counseling, relational counseling does not work. I think counseling and therapy have their places. What I also understand, since I'm a trained developmental psychologist and I've worked as a crisis counselor at major hospitals, is that therapy sessions and counseling sessions often turn from helping someone overcome, transcend a certain deficit, to a dependent interaction between the one given counsel and the one receiving counsel, the one given therapy and the one receiving therapy. I've seen this replayed over and over throughout my professional life and experiences. And Scott, based on my evaluation of him, not as a developmental psychologist, but as a friend, as a mystic who practices the law of assumption, Scott's primary issue has to do with his thinking. Because remember, what has your focus has your life. If you're spending 3 out of 5 working days in therapy and counseling sessions, what are you thinking about every day? What do you think this person is thinking about? What do you think Scott is thinking about? Scott is not thinking about a solution when he gets in his therapist or his counselor's office. Scott is creating a persona that has issues that he can present to his therapist and counselor so that they can issue a remedy for him so he can feel good about his relationship and feel good about himself. But not because Scott has any well-defined underlying issue. Scott's thinking has gotten him trapped in a self-fulfilling cycle of dependency and need. Something is wrong with me, hence I have to speak to someone. Something is wrong with my relationship, so I have to take my wife, I have to drag my wife. He literally says he has to drag her to the session because she's not interested in it. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how many therapy sessions you go to, how many counseling sessions you go to, a counselor and a therapist address symptoms. In order for a person's behavior to change, the person has to be addressed. The thinking has to be addressed. Treating a symptom is not going to fix Scott. And that's what Scott has been doing for a long time, for years. I told Scott simply, I said, Scott, you have to change your thinking because something has your focus. The therapy session has your focus. The counseling session has your focus. And as a result of those two things having your focus, that's what you've given your life to. And now it has derailed every other aspect of your life. It's affecting your professional life and it's continuing to affect your relationship with your wife. There isn't anything wrong with you. Your thinking needs to be adjusted because what has your focus has your life. When I lived in a state of lack, guess where my focus was? On what I did not have. That's the only thing I dwelt on. How am I going to pay this bill? How am I going to pay that bill? How am I going to pay my kids' tuition? How am I going to meet this debt obligation? How am I going to meet the bank's obligation? How am I going to do this? How am I going to do that? All I thought about was debt, 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 and debt. Debt had my focus, so guess what happened to my life? I remained in debt. It's not until you change your focus that the results in your life will begin to change. Thinking. Thinking is intentional, directed mental energy focused on a specific idea. So Earl Nightingale was right. We become what we think. If thinking correlates with the imagination and the imagination is God and God is a creator, and you're not thinking, that means you're not creating the life you want. You're living your life at the mercy of others and often people who don't have your best interests. You're living your life at the mercy of institutions that don't give a rip about your humanity. That's the rabbit hole you find yourself in once you don't employ thinking. Thinking is everything, just as the imagination is everything. No thinking, no imagination. No imagination, no creation. No creation, your life remains stagnant. You're going nowhere. You think about nothing, you become nothing. When I tell you I understand this, ladies and gentlemen, I understand this because I was one of those individuals who did not think. I thought I was thinking, but I wasn't thinking. I was engaged in mental activity on a daily basis, that became repetitive, but repetitive mental activity, that does not constitute thinking. Thinking is intentional. Thinking is deliberate. Thinking is focused. Thinking is energy. Energy attracts like energy. Your thoughts attract like thoughts. If your thoughts are woe is me, you're going to attract a bunch of woe is me. Your thoughts are always expressed as your results, all the time. No exception. So let's make this simple. If you want to improve your life, which I believe you do, change the way you go about thinking. And when you do employ thinking, think about the right things. How do you think about the right things, Josiah? Some of you might be asking that, and that's a legitimate question. Here's the profound answer. You think about the right things. That's it. Think about the right things, and you will continue to think about the right things. Dwell on good. Forget about what's happening externally. Focus on what's happening inside. If you focus on the good that's happening within, it must manifest itself on the outside. And guess what's going to happen? Your life will be epically glorious, adventurous, and everything you want it to be. But there is no epic realization of your dreams, your goals, your mission and purpose if your thinking is not right. So get your thinking right and you will get your life right. Like anything else, if you want to get better at thinking, you must practice thinking over and over and over and over. Be intentional. Be directed. Be focused only on what you want. You deserve to experience life's best every single day. And remember, whatever follows I am, you become.